stand over here in the shade. They used to have blonde hair. They don't anymore. So it's a self-defense mechanism. First of all, let me say thank you to our hosts, Linda and Molly, for putting on this wonderful event. And thank you all for showing up today. It's just really humbling for me to be here. I know many of you know the origin story of the newsletter, but I would like to retell it because I think it speaks to the moment that we find ourselves in. Can everyone hear me back there? We have 3 adult daughters. When Donald Trump was elected, or before the 2016 election, we assured them that the adults in the room had this, that don't worry, he wasn't going to win, it wasn't possible, Hillary would pull it out. And when Trump won, my daughters were literally devastated, as were Jill and I. So much so that we had a daughter who was in DC and is still in DC. We had to fly out to DC to help essentially stage an intervention and help get her back on her feet. That's how devastating it was. She could none of my daughters could stand the sight or the sound of Donald Trump's brain. It was a very dispiriting and frightening time. I will tell you that by the time that the inauguration rolled around in 2017, my daughter was laying down in front of the entrances to the National Mall to prevent people from listening to Trump speak. So that was a good sign of recovery, but the fact of the matter is that they still have difficulty processing him because he is a predator. He just instinctually knows how to frighten and worry people. That is his one superpower. And so I began, at the suggestion of my wife, Jill, who I hope some of you follow her blog, which is entirely different but entirely wonderful. She said that we should stay in daily touch with our 3 adult daughters and take responsibility for what had happened and assure them that we would help make things better. And one thing that she suggested I do is write an email to them each night, just summarizing to them what had happened that day so that they didn't have to fully engage with the news because, frankly, they were too frightened and afraid and assaulted, really, by what was going on. So I started writing a daily email to them, and on February 2nd, 2017, 3 friends of the family asked if they could get a copy of the nightly email because they were feeling the same way. And these were retired judges in Los Angeles Superior Court and the CFO of a corporation. And so they passed it around to friends and family, and it grew. And it grew to what it is today. And I tell you that not to brag about the newsletter. I tell you that to say that the way that you are feeling is shared by tens of millions of Americans, and it is completely normal and acceptable and human to feel the feelings that we are all feeling, including me. Indeed, you would not be human if you did not have a sense of anxiety and dread and fear. And the question is not whether we are afraid. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Each of you, by being here today, is answering that question. You are going to do something about it. None of you has to take on your shoulders the burden of saving America by yourself. Some of you can write postcards. Some of you can engage in local community organizing. Some of you are fearless and can do phone banking. Others of you, just by showing up at protests, are helping to defend democracy. I have a number of comments, but I want to skip to the end because it helps frame what I'm going to say. And that is, we are going to prevail. We are going to win. It is only a question of time. And the hardest part, the most difficult part, is keeping faith, not feeling dispirited, not giving in to a sense of hopelessness. If you can be a leader during this time, if you have it in you to model for others a sense of courage and hope, if you can do that, that is the greatest gift that you can give to anyone in today's environment. But if you can't do that, the only thing we ask of you is don't give up. Just stick close to someone who is willing to fight. Just don't give up, because the day will come when your presence in the street will be enough. There will be a day when there will be tens of millions of Americans saying enough. And when that day comes, we will win. And it is coming. Things may get worse before they get better, but they are going to get better as long as we don't give up. And the fact that you are here today is your statement that you are not giving up. So God bless you all for that. I want to talk a little bit about where we are and some of the news memes and propaganda and disinformation that we have to fight, because I think it makes our resistance harder. But I think the first thing we have to do is recognize we're going through tough times. And anybody who tells you differently isn't focused on reality. We are in a moment of peril for our nation. But our nation has been here before in deeper peril, and we have survived. And the only thing we have to do to make it through this perilous moment is to not give up. If we don't give up, we will outlast them and we will win. It follows as day follows night. So do not give up, no matter how badly you feel. Find a friend who can help you through this moment. Read the newsletter, read Jessica Craven, read Joyce Vance, read Heather Cox Richardson, watch Lawrence O'Donnell. There are sources of hope that can help you through this moment. And I mean this in all seriousness. There are times in our lives when we need professional help to make it through difficult periods. And there is no shame in that. And if that's what you need, do it. Because we need you for the long run. Now, we're living in tough times, but the reality is we are strong. We are gaining. I wrote it in the newsletter last night or the night before. If the 2024 election was held today, we would win in the House, we would win in the Senate, and we would win the presidency. We all know that, and they know that too, which is why they are working like hell to get everything accomplished in this horrible reconciliation bill that they are trying to pass, because they know this is their last chance for a generation to do the damage to Medicaid and Medicare and the arts and sciences that they have been hoping to do for decades. The reality is that we are strong. How many of you went out on No King's Day? Okay. Look at that. And how many of you were surprised at how many people showed up at your location? It was overwhelming. I think everyone had the same reaction. That was a moment in American history that will be written about by historians for decades but is being ignored by the mainstream media because it doesn't fit with their narrative and because they are afraid of Donald Trump. Shame on them. The local coverage of the protests was very good, but the national coverage, it disappeared from the New York Times by Sunday at 9 a.m., the day after the largest protests in American history. And I have been sort of cautious in describing them that way. I'm waiting for a third-party organization to give a final estimate. It was 5 million for certain. It may have been 10 million and possibly 15 million. And yet it was it was as if it did not happen in the major media.
That's true.
8 hours later. Now that's disappointing that we have to fight this fight without the backing of the major media. And I want to talk about who we should be supporting. But here's the thing. We don't need the major media to tell us what happened on No King's Day. We were there. Jill and I go out to a Takedown Tesla protest at some random corner in the San Fernando Valley, Victory and Topanga, every Saturday, and there are 300 people there on a good day. And on No King's Day, there were 3,000, 4,000 people. LAPD sent a helicopter to circle overhead and to tell us to stay on the sidewalks and out of the intersection because people were walking through the intersection on a rotating basis. We gathered the attention of the LAPD, and we were one of the smaller protests. Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, the South Bay, downtown. It was just incredible. There were dozens of protests, Studio City in Los Angeles, each of which was a newsworthy event, all of which disappeared in 8 hours, according to the major media. Shame on them. They are cowards, and they will be held to account in the judgment of historians as we move forward. But you and I know that we are strong, and we should take confidence from that fact. The fact that all of you showed up here today. Think back 8 years ago, would you have been here? No. You would have been doing something else in your lives. I've had the privilege of meeting with the Commit to Democracy 3 times. You have persisted despite disappointments. And that is all we need to prevail. This spasm of reactionary, racist, white nationalist strain in American identity will exhaust itself, and we need to be there to pick up the pieces. And I think that we will begin picking up those pieces in 2026 and 2028, and we will never look back.
Hope he's right.
I want to, Linda, you keep time for me. I didn't start my timer, so you give me the hook, okay? I want to bust a couple of myths. Not only is the media ignoring what's really happening in the streets, the mainstream media is reacting with glee to the fighting in the Democratic National Committee. They have overinterpreted the loss in 2024, saying the Democrats are out of touch. They stopped listening to the working class. They stopped listening to the unions. Absolute, unmitigated, and this is a political term of art, bullshit. You go back and you look at Kamala Harris's platform and Joe Biden's platform before that, and the Democrats had it right. It was absolutely the right message. We didn't stop listening to anyone. What really happened, and I'm maybe one of the few people who says this out loud, so apologies if you don't agree with me, Donald Trump ran a racist, sexist, white nationalist campaign, and Kamala Harris lost because America fell for that garbage and was not ready to elect a black Asian woman as president. And so all of this hand-wringing that these overpriced consultants are giving us about why Democrats lost is complete and utter BS. Kamala Harris would be president today, but for 300,000 votes in 3 states. That's how close it was. There was no mandate. Donald Trump did not even win a majority of the popular vote. He won a plurality of 2/3 of the vote in an election where 90 million people who were eligible to vote did not vote. So he represents a minority of Americans, not a majority. Sadly, they were able to wrangle a trifecta out of that, and they are using that trifecta for everything it is worth because they know their time is limited. They see what we are doing at the grassroots level, and they know they are not going to be able to do this in the future. This is their last rodeo, because we're going to make certain that that's what happens. I just want to say, as a defense mechanism, anytime someone tells you that the Democrats stopped listening to the middle class or the working class or the poor, just go back and ask them to compare the platforms of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And you know what's interesting is there will be a lot of similarities between what the Democrats ran on, what Kamala Harris ran on, and what Donald Trump ran on. But we now know that virtually everything Donald Trump ran on was a lie. So we can look at that platform where he was, I can't even remember everything, every promise that he's broken, but virtually every campaign promise he's made, he has broken, except that he's going to extend the tax cuts for the affluent, for the billionaires and millionaires, and for corporations. That's the one promise he's keeping. He's breaking his promise to keep his hands off Medicare. He's breaking his promise to keep his hands off Medicaid. He is raping the environment. He's going to sell tens of millions of acres of national forest land to commercial interests. He is setting us back a generation in fighting climate change. Everything that he said was a lie.
No war.
But we knew, no war.
No war.
No
Another
war.
one.
But we knew it was a lie when he said it. And you know what? So did his supporters. But they wanted to own the libs, which we should talk about. Why are they so angry at what they consider to be liberals in America? And that is because large segments of America have been left behind by a globalized economy. And it's no longer the case that if you just stay in place, that you can get a good job and raise a family and send your kids to college by simply doing what your father and your grandfather and your great-grandfather did in some industrial town in America. Now, I'm not here to defend globalism. I'm here to say it is a fact. And the fact that American workers are now competing with workers in Southeast Asia who are paid a fraction of American workers is not the fault of Democrats. And it's not the fault of immigrants. But they need someone to blame, because they're not going to blame themselves. And so what they have done is they have vilified immigrants who, frankly, for many states in America, are the only reason that those states are not collapsing into failed states. The immigrant population in many states in the middle of America is the only thing that is keeping the population at a steady state. And but for immigration, their populations would be declining because young people are moving away, because there's no opportunity. And the only thing that appears to have changed is now that there are immigrants coming in to fill those lower service level jobs. And so now they're blaming the immigrants for taking jobs that there's no one to fill. Jill and I drove last year. Jill and I drove down the Mississippi from Minneapolis to New Orleans, and one of the things that was striking. Okay, I'm going to tell you something that you can't share with anybody. Jill and I have a secret addiction, Every day we have to get a Diet Dr. Pepper, or there's nothing right with the world. And one of the few places that sells it is McDonald's. So as we drove down the Mississippi, we would go into small towns or medium-sized towns, and we would look for, or even large towns, and look for the local McDonald's to get our Diet Dr. Pepper. Let me tell you how bad it was. During COVID, we would only go out once a day to get a Diet Dr. Pepper, and we would go to the local Wendy's, and after a while they took pity on us and started to give us the military discount for Diet Dr. Peppers. So anyway, driving down the Mississippi, one of the things we noticed was that about half the McDonald's stores were closed. And so finally, there was one, I think this was in St. Louis, we asked the young black teenager at the takeout window, why are so many of McDonald's closed? And he said they can't hire anybody. There's no workforce because they're anti-immigrant. Those are entry-level jobs, and they don't want non-white Americans to fill those jobs. And it is a toxic brew. Jill and I were in Dubuque, and we walked into a cute little shop, big shop, like a tourist shop, and there was an 80-year-old plus woman behind the counter. We assumed that she was the owner, and we said to her, this is a very nice shop, but the town was just deserted. And we said, how do you, are you the owner? How do you keep this open, kind of thing. She says, oh no, I'm the friend of the owner. I just volunteer my time for free. She says, there has been a help wanted sign in the local, on the door and in the local newspaper for 1 year, and we have had 0 applicants to come and serve as a retail clerk in a store. The young people are fleeing. And so yes, of course, the people who are aging in place are angry and afraid, and the only thing different in their world is that there are immigrants who are actually there to help them, to help provide care for them, to help provide their food, to help work on their farms. And yet the Republicans have weaponized immigration against Democrats. Let me just say this, I don't know how we get there, but immigration is not a problem in America. Well, it is a problem. And the problem is that we need more of it, not less of it. So let's take all of these sort of negative storylines, these myths about Democrats being out of touch, and set them aside. And there's one more that I want to talk about. And I know that I spoke to Sky, there he is, who works with the DNC. Let me just say the Democratic National Committee gets a really bad rap. It has a limited purpose, which is to help coordinate the state parties. It does a really great job at that. Yes, like every institution, it has its problems. Yes, it is going through some infighting now, which is a healthy sign of a healthy organization, that young people are anxious for change. God bless the DNC. We could be like the RNC, which is controlled by the president's daughter-in-law, which has been turned into a private for-profit organization for the president. We're not that. We're still having fights about our future, which is a good sign. It is a healthy sign. So for all of the pundits, and I am so sick and tired of all of these lazy journalists who want to make a story about, oh, the Democrats are fighting, without talking about the fact that the Republican Party has collapsed, is just beyond me. But we have to have the internal certitude that we are in the right, that what we are doing as a grassroots movement, as a party, is normal. And what is happening in the Republican Party is not only abnormal, it is grotesque, and it will mark the end of the Republican Party in America. Now, I know the most common interaction I have with readers usually involves some expression that things are bad, that people are worried. I mean, you know, every day you wake up. A week ago, we weren't worried about a war in Iran. We don't know what it will be next week. I mean, it's one thing after another, and people are exhausted, and they are dispirited, and they wonder sort of where is all of this going. And I get that, and as I said before, if you don't feel that way, you're not human. You should be feeling that way. But we're sitting here today on a Tuesday. I'm traveling this week, so I want to make certain. We're sitting here on a Tuesday afternoon, and this would not have been happening 8 years ago. And what is going on today with Commit to Democracy is happening all across America. There are tens of millions of committed grassroots activists who are going to save America and American democracy. We did it in 2018, we did it in 2020, in 2021, and 2022, and we came within 300,000 votes in 2024. And don't let anybody tell you any differently. The election was extraordinarily close, and I believe it was lost because so many Americans had a problem with electing a black Asian woman as president, and shame on them for staying home in that election. But if we want to make ourselves feel good, just look back 10 days ago to the No Kings March, the largest march in our nation's history. Now, I've said that to you. I haven't written that in the newsletter because I'm waiting for a third-party group at Harvard to finish its count. 5 million is a safe number. 10 million is a probable number, and maybe it was 12 or 13 or 14 or 15 million. It was the largest mass march in American history. And we should feel very good about that, but we should also be unsatisfied because we don't need 15 million people in the street. We need 30 million people in the street so that the goddamn New York Times could do more than give us 8 hours of coverage of a monumental event in our nation's history. That is this. I mean, the Times, for complicated reasons, relegated the story of the Holocaust to section B and beyond in its coverage. It did not want to talk about the inconvenient fact that Hitler was engaged in mass murder of Jews. And right now, the New York Times doesn't want to talk about the inconvenient fact that the people are rising up against an incompetent, addled, venal, corrupt president because, I believe, and I'll stop picking on the Times, because major media is afraid of Donald Trump.
Wow.
Shame on them.
Yeah, why? What did he do?
So I'm going to sort of close my remarks here in about 5 minutes, so think about questions that you may have. You know, I'm a father to 3 adult daughters, now have 5 grandchildren, and for those of you who have daughters or children, you know you spend a lot of time dealing with their anxieties about the future, real or imagined. And one of the things that I always did as a father is I tried to help them maintain perspective. And I think that's the most important thing we can do today. Yes, things are hard now for us, but you know to a moral certainty that they were worse by an order of magnitude for Black Americans 75 years ago in the middle of America, where it is absolutely true that a white man could shoot a black man in front of a dozen witnesses, all of whom end up on the jury and not be convicted of murder. Imagine living under that white nationalist regime. What did they do? Did they give up? No. They persevered. That is what we must do. And I understand how difficult it is in this moment. I mean, you know, look, every morning when I pick up my smartphone after I get up and look at the notifications that have rolled in overnight, I get this sinking feeling in my stomach about, oh God, you know, what has happened now? But as Mark Elias of Democracy Docket says, it doesn't matter whether you're afraid. What matters is what you do about it. So things may get worse before they get better. In fact, they probably will get worse before they get better. But they will get better. And in the grand sweep of history, even over the last decade or two or three, we can see that America has made incredible progress toward a more just, more tolerant society. We are paying the price, and this is my personal opinion, for having the temerity to elect a black president in 2008. That is when the modern MAGA movement began, when Mitch McConnell stood up and said that the Republican objective after the election of Barack Obama was to make certain that he failed. They didn't care about America. They cared about making certain that a black man would not be a successful president. And we are still paying that price and the price of an unresolved civil war.
And he was successful.
Yeah. And the good news is that over time, demographics are in our favor. I am not saying that demographics are destiny. We cannot be lazy and complacent and just assume that demographics will fix our problems. But boy, I would much rather be the Democratic Party looking into the rising face of America as younger, more diverse, less affluent, more motivated for a better life, more desirous of an education, than being in a party that says, oh no, education is bad, we don't want competition, we don't want immigration. I mean, that is a formula for a failed state. Our vision of the future is hopeful, people understand that, and people will respond to that. 2024 hurt. There's no way to get around that. But let's, as I wrote 2 or 3 days ago, if 2024 was held today, we would win in a trifecta. I have the privilege of being in contact with a number of Latino and Hispanic organizations. They are absolutely confident that what happened in 2024 with some of the constituencies in the Black, in the Hispanic and Latino communities has reversed itself for good reason. I mean, you hear about the 3 American Latino Marines whose father was handcuffed and beaten by ICE, and they are dismayed. And this was a man who has been here for 15, 20 years and who was out working as a landscaper at a chain restaurant. And for that crime, he was pepper sprayed, handcuffed, and beaten. And I think that the veil has been dropped, and that some of the discontent that led to slight edges that allowed the Republicans to win Congress and in the Senate and the presidency have evaporated. Boy, if you were a Republican at this point in time, you should be afraid, because the wave is coming in 2026 and 2028. Will it be easy? No. Will it be messy? Yes. That's the way it should be. That's the way democracies work. And we should not fear that. We should not look at infighting or disputes with any sense of shame or embarrassment. What's going on in New York right now with the mayoral election is called democracy. There are competing ideas about who should lead New York City. That's good. What is bad is having one corrupt man tell the party who the candidate will be. We are not there, and we will never be there because of people like you. What can you do? The most frequent question I get is, what can I do? All right, I want you to write this down. It is profound. Keep doing exactly what you are doing. You are on the right path. We are winning. We are changing the narrative. We will win. It is just a matter of time. The only thing we must do is not give up, not flag, and if we have it in us to be more than that, if we have it in us to be a leader, if we have it in us to hold someone who is in despair and just say, be by my side while I walk on this journey, then that is a blessing that will help save democracy. We are going to win through millions of small acts of grace and courage and democracy. Together, they will create a heft and a momentum that is unstoppable. And you need to feel that in your bones so that those around you will feel that in theirs as well. So with that, I will take questions. And again, it's such an honor to be here with you today. Thank you very much.